Can we switch to the video disc, which is in play mode?
I'm really interested in how you put people and computers together.
We will be using the TV screens or their equivalents for electronic books of the future.
In the next 6 months is digital cash.
Most of the stuff you get through the air will be getting
Information the ground and come to the air.
give you a two-way
Satellite link, a local area network
and having
through the
TV
favelas
sets
outside.
do some of the work.
5,000 hours. Music on a compact disc.
Real opportunity.
Very interested in touch-sensitive displays. High-tech, high-touch, not having to pick up your fingers to use them. Very high resolution.
There is another way where computers touch people wearing, physically wearing onto themselves. In the developing world,
Suddenly, on September 11th, the world got bigger.
Thank you. When I was asked to do this, I was also asked to look at all 14 TED Talks that I had given. I'm going to characterize the years, and I'm even going to go back to some very early work of mine, and this was the kind of stuff I was doing in the 60s, very direct manipulation, very influenced as I studied architecture by the architect Moshe Safdie, and you can see we even build robotic things that could build habitat-like structures. And this, for me, was sort of not yet the Media Lab, but was the beginning of what I'll call sensory computing. And I pick fingers partly because everybody thought it was ridiculous. Papers were published about how stupid it was to use fingers. 3 reasons. One was they were low resolution. The other is your hand would occlude what you wanted to see. And the third, which was the winner, was that your fingers would get the screen dirty. And hence, fingers would never be a device that you'd use. And this is a device we built in the 70s, which has never even been picked up. It's not just touch sensitive, it's pressure sensitive.
A yellow circle there.
Later work, and again, this was before TED 1.
Move that west of the diamond. Create a large green circle there. Oh, shit.
Was to sort of do interface concurrently. So when you talked and you pointed and you sort of had, if you will, multiple channels. And we built this truck and this rig. We did sort of a simulation because you had video discs. And again, this is 76. And then sort of many years later, you get this truck. And so you have Google Maps. So this was the Media Lab's sort of, this is what we said we'd do, that the world of computers, publishing, and so on would come together. Again, not generally accepted, but very much part of TED in the early days, and that this is really where we were headed. And the reason I show this car, and actually a rather ugly slide, is just, again, to tell you the kind of story that characterized a little bit of my life. This is a student of mine who had done a PhD called Backseat Driver. It was in the early days of GPS. The car knew where it was, and it would give audio instructions to the driver when to turn right, when to turn left, and so on. Turns out there are a lot of things in those instructions that back in that period were pretty challenging, like, what does it mean, take the next right? Well, if you're coming up on a street, the next right's probably the one after, and there are lots of issues, and the student did a wonderful thesis, and the MIT patent office said, don't patent it. It'll never be accepted. The liabilities are too large, there'll be insurance issues, don't patent it. So we didn't. But it shows you how people, again, at times, don't really look at really what's happening. Some work, and I'll just go through these very quickly. A lot of sensory stuff. You might recognize a young Yo-Yo Ma and tracking his body for playing, and the cello or the hypercello. These fellows literally walked around like that at the time. It's now a little bit more discreet, more commonplace. Television, again, television, when I said today, that was back in 1990, and the television of tomorrow would look something like that. Again, people but they laughed cynically. They didn't laugh with much sort of appreciation. Telecommunications in the 1990s, George Gilder decided that he would call this diagram the Negroponte switch. I'm probably much less famous than George, so when he called it the Negroponte switch, it stuck. But the idea of things that came in the ground would go in the air, and the stuff in the air would go into the ground, has played itself out. That is the original slide from that year. And it has sort of worked in lockstep obedience. We started Wired magazine. Some people, I remember we sort of shared the reception desk periodically, and some parent called up irate that his son had given up Sports Illustrated to subscribe for Wired, and he said, "Are you some porno magazine or something?" And couldn't understand why his son would be interested in Wired, at any rate. I will go through this a little quicker. This is my favorite, 1995, back page of Newsweek magazine. Okay. Read it. Okay. You must admit that gives you, at least it gives me pleasure to when somebody says how dead wrong you are. I became more involved with computers and learning and influenced by Seymour, but particularly looking at learning as something that is best approximated by computer programming. When you write a computer program, you've got to not just list things out and sort of take an algorithm and translate it into a set of instructions, but when there's a bug, and all programs have bugs, you've got to debug it. You've got to go in, change it, and then re-execute, and you iterate. And that iteration is really a very, very good approximation of learning. So that led to my own work with Seymour in places like Cambodia and the starting of One Laptop Per Child. Enough TED Talks on One Laptop Per Child, so I'll go through it very fast. But it did give us the chance to do something at a relatively large scale in the area of learning, development, and computing. Very few people know that One Laptop Per Child was a $1 billion project, and it was, at least over the 7 years I ran it. But even more important, the World Bank contributed zero, USAID zero. It was mostly the countries using their own treasuries, which is very interesting. At least to me, it was very interesting in terms of what I plan to do next. So these are the various places it happened. I then tried an experiment, and the experiment happened in Ethiopia. And here's the experiment. Experiment is, can learning happen where there are no schools? And we dropped off tablets with no instructions and let the children figure it out. And in a short period of time, they not only turned them on and were using 50 apps per child within 5 days, they were singing ABC songs within 2 weeks, but they hacked Android within 6 months. And so that seemed sufficiently interesting. This is perhaps the best picture I have. Kid on your right is sort of nominated himself as teacher. Look at the kid on the left, and so on. There are no adults involved in this at all. And my prediction, and this is a prediction, because it'll be 30 years, I won't be here. But one of the things about learning how to read, we have been doing a lot of consuming of information, learning through our eyes, and so it may be a very inefficient channel. So my prediction is that we are going to ingest information. You're going to swallow a pill and know English. You're going to swallow a pill and know Shakespeare. And the way to do it is through the bloodstream. So once it's in your bloodstream, it basically goes through it and gets into the brain, and when it knows that it's in the brain in the different pieces, it deposits it in the right places. So it's ingesting.
Have you been hanging out with Ray Kurzweil by any chance?
No, but I've been hanging around with Ed Boyden and hanging around with one of the speakers who's here, Hugh Herr, and there are a number of people. This isn't quite as far-fetched. So 30 years from now,
We will check it out.
We can
We're going to
be-
be back, and we're going to play this clip 30 years from now, and then all eat the red pill. Well, thank you for that.
People have always preferred this notion of instant gratification. I need something and I need it now. In today's world, the way you order a movie is obviously instant. The way you order music is obviously instant.
And related to that, more content is being consumed, not less.
The media now are actually the individuals.
An increasing number of people share information and share stories of their realities in a far less mediated way than before.
We have the freedom, we have the power of choice. So really the viewer is in control. With that control comes a responsibility. This is why curation is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing.
You have like different layers responsible for how information is curated right now. So for instance, what is the role of algorithms? How information is actually curated by machines through social profiling?
Some news organizations think that the future is almost completely algorithmic. I think human judgment is still going to really matter.
Consumers have a lot more agency. They're no longer just passive receivers of goods and services and of content. We describe something we call the participation scale. Now at the bottom of that scale is consumption. The next step is sharing other people's content or ideas. Above that is what we call shaping. That's where people take an idea and remix it. The next level is funding, contributing to making a product possible. The next step is producing. At the top of the participation scale is co-ownership.
Anyone who claims that digital is dumbing down everything should look at pure digital plays like Netflix and Amazon Prime. Particularly in scripted television, there's more quality today than there's ever been.
You need to think about all the different platforms. Vine is very different than Snapchat, than what it is on YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. It's not a battle between one versus the other.